Okay, I have received numbers from Jackie and Tana on my budget, and I guess I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
So you're going up from $98,111 to $113,174 billing to other entities that you collect taxes for. Right?
What Commissioner Smith is referring to is a handout that I gave everyone. At the top, it's cost of collecting 2020 taxes. I'm required to take my overall budget and determine how much of that goes to collecting taxes. And I came up with 299,795 is my total, with 186,621 being the county's portion, leaving $113,174 to be prorated out to the other entities that the county collects taxes for. And so that was 98,000 last year's charge. So I'm looking at, what did you say that number was, Charlie?
15,000 is the difference that you've gone up on the billings to the.
And I, down at the bottom of that handout, I've prorated out what each entity would cost based on their percentage of last year's tax roll. And I present that to you as part of the budget, because these numbers down here in the gray where it says estimated share based on percent of 2019 levy totals, that's the amount that I am suggesting be put into the tax collection contracts that we renew in August.
Jerry, I remember you schooled me on this once before. You can only charge the excess that it costs to collect from taxes for these other entities. We still bear the.
We bear the majority of the cost because I am, what's the word, constitutionally required to collect the county taxes.
Well, under salaries, all deputies of 196,000, you allocated 859. So that's almost 50% of it.
That salary, all deputies, that's not the total salaries. That's just that 196,518. I think that was 50% of the salaries, because the other 50% I prorated over to motor vehicle and the other things that we do in our office. And then I did the 98,000. I just split that in half again. And then I looked at it and I compared it. In the past, 2 deputies have been close to that same cost of the, looking at my formula. And because we added another person, I looked at the cost of 2.5 deputies. And looking at 2.5, it's much higher than the 98,259. That makes sense?
If it makes sense to you,
Well, I have a spreadsheet for that too.
I don't need to see this.
It's just putting it all into
But all
to
in all,
words is what's hard.
the net
for me.
increase then to run the is
The
22,000 minus the $15,061, so 7. But we've also given that new person back during this year. So
yes, and the salaries in this for the tax collection is not based on projected salaries for the county's 2021 budget.
what about
I use what they are currently in this year.
what the additional person? Let's go back to that for a second. How much of that was due to unmandated or unfunded mandates?
I can't tell you. I just know that we needed another person in our office to be able to try to keep up with the flow of work. And
But you also mentioned, I think, when you came.
oh yeah, there are unfunded
There were
mandates, but I don't
different-
have time to sit back at my desk and calculate all that.
The taxpayer wanted to know how much is coming out of the the legislature.
Wow.
What I'm talking about is to be able to tell the taxpayers here why their tax rates are going up. I mean, it's a legitimate question.
Oh, I understand that.
And it's particularly legitimate when we're now held to a 3.5%
Right.
rate increase.
Mhm. Well,
Right.
I went back and I calculated all those numbers and are not numbers per se, but the things that we were doing that were mandated and things that are being required, the flow of traffic. And I presented that all in our last commissioners court meeting that we were at.
Person with your vast experience, you come up with that number in 5 minutes.
No,
Take a little
I'm
time.
afraid not.
Well, she's already moving into retirement mode.
Yeah, I think she's already half retired.
What have y'all been calling me? A has-been? Oh, part-time. They have been.
Jackie, on your thing here, you had $3,895 for bond premiums. What is that?
Bond
That's
premium.
their performance bonds, their security
haven't
bonds
been
that they
paying
have to
Security
have.
bond.
The security bonds that they have every year.
So where they've been paying for that in the past?
In the past, they should have been in insurance and we've moved it out, but I don't see anything in insurance.
Yeah, I used to have bond and insurance together, and then last
Wow.
year's budget,
It
y'all
wasn't.
split them.
Mhm.
And bond premiums is a new line item, 459, but I think it used to be in 460, I
But
believe.
it wasn't, well, it was higher and then it reduced down. I'd have to look at it, Jack, and see what happened
Okay.
in the last year.
Well, I will tell you what it is. The 3895 is budgeted for 2020. That's because we have a new tax assessor collector coming. And
We
they,
don't trust her as much, right?
no,
Well, no.
I pay 3895 every 4
4
years.
years.
Oh,
So
oh.
normally that
Back.
3895 is there every 4 years for a bond. 100,000 to Commissioner's Court and 100,000 bond to the Governor of Texas. Having said that, I requested that amount, the 3895 in the 2020 budget will be for Anna's bonds to cover her for the next 4 years.
Good.
Normally, in the past, then it would drop down to 2021. But you'll see that we put that in 2021 because we're requesting that bond amount for the chief deputy. The chief deputy is just now currently protected under a blanket bond that I have for my employees. Across the state of Texas, there are many that bond their chief deputies for the same amount as the tax collector. And more are trying to get that in their budget because what happens, as one so eloquently put it, she's a tax collector, is if she gets hit by a truck and does not make it, then the county will have to shut down the tax office until somebody's appointed and bonds are given. Because the state of Texas won't allow their supplies to be sold, the registration, that type of thing, unless a bond is in place for somebody in charge.
So the blanket bond covers that.
No, the blanket bond does not. That's a $345 bond that covers my employees, I think 25 to 50,000, I can't remember the number. But this $3,000 is for a 4-year bond, which this year would be for the chief, next year would be for the chief deputy. And if that happens and something happens to Anna, then the chief deputy could be appointed by the court to fulfill, and the office does not have to close because she currently has the required bonds
Right.
by the state of Texas.
3895 that's budgeted to be spent this year was for 4 years out into the future, right?
It
Can that
is
be
for,
transferred
Yes.
between the two of you?
no, this 3895, I think includes $345 for the blanket bond. So whatever the difference is, the 34,
$3,500.
whatever, 35, that's a 4-year bond that will have to be purchased this year, at the end of this year.
Right.
So it will be in place on January 1 when Anna is sworn in. And it will cover her for 4 years.
But in the past, we haven't been, only been paying one of those bonds. And so now you're saying we need two, right?
I'm requesting to. So for next year, Anna would get those bonds for her chief deputy. And then everybody's protected. And then the next 2 years, now everybody's covered for 4 years in the future. So for 2 years, that 3,500 would go away.
All right, let's assume that what the unthinkable happens and our tax assessor collector is incapacitated somewhat. How long does the tax office stay shut down in order to replace that person?
Until an appointment is made by the court and a bond is in place. So it's up to the insurance company how fast they get the bond in place.
How long does that usually take?
I don't know, because mine has just been a renewal over these years and I can't remember back how
I
long.
mean, it could be weeks, months.
It could be weeks because a blanket bond is different. When we're asking for two $100,000 bonds, they go in a little deeper credit. I've seen tax collectors that was elected not able to get a bond until like 6 weeks into the new term.
So we're spending
Yeah, and they-
an extra $3,500 to keep the office open for 5 to 6 weeks. Is that what you're saying? On
Maybe.
something that may or may
Yeah,
not
I
happen.
had never looked at it that way, but yeah.
And you're requesting that in this budget.
Yeah,
Well, that covers the term of the new tax assessor collector or the returning tax assessor collector.
No, it's an
for
additional
the
one.
timeframe.
it's an additional on the chief deputy.
Oh, okay.
The bond that we need to, what is it, the word, start in December or November of this year, that's in my 2020 budget. That would be Anna's bond.
Okay.
Effective 2021 through those 4 years.
So the number 2 spot would be sort of pre-covered from now on,
Pre-covered
so just
for
the
4
number 1
years.
spot.
Right.
Anna, when you take off to go to a conference, you and the chief deputy are riding the same car, do you?
We have,
We have occasionally, but not.
We may have to
often.
stop that practice.
Well,
Yeah.
occasionally, we've only done it a couple times.
yeah.
Because a lot of times, the tax collector has to be there earlier, because she has meetings before the conference starts, so I'll come like the next day. So there's not a lot of times we ride together. But if it makes you comfortable, we won't ride together.
That, you think
Even though I
that,
drive
you
very,
get to thinking that that's silly, but it's really not.
it's really not.
It really, yeah. You really need to be careful.
I have tax collector friends in this time period that we're living in right now, that the chief deputy is not in the office at the same time as the tax assessor collector. They are on opposing opposite schedules, so they won't both
Both
be,
get sick at the same time.
yes, exposed.
All right.
Not so fast. Judge, I don't have any more questions.
Do
All right, thank you, Jerry.
Jerry, do you know when's the law firm gonna resume, say, tax sales stuff?
Okay, I have spoken to them this week or last week, and, our last sale was in March. We've had one scheduled, I think, we talked about having one in June or July, but we decided not to have it. So now we're looking at September. I have asked the judge his opinion, and he, said I should go forth with a September sale, which would be September 1st. So, the law firm and I are now working on the list, and we will just have to see what happens. My concern is the sidewalk in front of the courthouse. There is not room for social distancing, I don't think, but, I will do what,
Well, some of those properties are ones that ended up being pushed because they were eyesores and junk and.
well, I don't know if
People
those are the
feeling
ones on the
stuff
sale are.
Well,
maybe, but I know there are some cases being looked at for filings and we have not filed new suits. That will happen in
the
July.
one I'm thinking about is one on Rattlesnake Point Road, Lake.
I don't remember.
I got one
And
on
it's,
Johnson.
it's on,
Two on Rattlesnake.
it's already gone through the process.
I do have one other thing to talk about that's really not my budget, but it's the tax rate calculation that comes up next. And we, as many of you know, that 3.5% is the cutoff now for rollback rate, our voter approval rate. And then because of the COVID virus and the declarations of disaster, the entities have the option of going to the 8% without triggering the voter approved election that is automatic if it's above 3.5%. So I am going to be looking for direction. Many of the seminars that I've taken online are saying that the tax assessor collector needs written direction and which way to go. So that will be on the Commissioner's Court agenda soon, asking which way do y'all want me to calculate?
It needs to be pretty quick.
So you'll probably come to us on July the 13th for that, right?
Okay,
Because the next meeting is after the 25th. Is that when you need?
okay. Well, Jackie and I will work together and get that on the,
Now, this is a one-year time. Right?
no, actually, I think it could go 2 more years,
'Cause I know
depending on how the
originally they're supposed to be 3
values
years,
do.
yeah.
And I have that written down. I will bring that with me if you want, when I come
Was
to
that part
court.
of the 149 page where they discussed and threw in that depending on the values? Because the way I read it, it was just, if you had a disaster, you've got 3 years to recover from.
Real quick, I've got it marked right here. It says we can use the 8% election trigger if they are in an area declared by disaster. And then it lists the different type of disasters and with other calamity underlying, which is what this virus is put us under. They can continue to use this adjusted calculation until the earlier of the second tax year in which the total taxable value of property exceeds the value on January 1 of this year, because this is when the disaster occurred, or the third tax year after the tax year in which the disaster occurred.
The earlier of and or.
Mhm.
It's kind of hard for us to figure out what the values are going to be next year.
Well, you won't know if you can use the 8% next year in the
That's
calculation,
what I mean.
but we
Kinda hard,
can
yeah.
this year.
This is another classic example of the drafting capabilities of the folks up there in Austin.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
We're going to miss you.
Judge Flanagan.
So will I.
Okay, y'all have a great day.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm here regarding the district judge or the district court budget. I think that you've got the printout as prepared by the auditor.
Page
Um,
22.
You came all the way over here for a $44 change?
Yes,
Okay.
and to tell you, it's only a $44 change.
Okay.
All right, make sure, Charlie, that you
You sure
understand.
you can't get
I'm
that
sorry,
44 down to
Commissioner
0?
Yeah, you know, that may be about as much as I've got in my pocket today. I'm not sure. But just to reinforce, yeah, it's only a $44 change. And for, I don't know, about 40 years now, we've not had any change in our personnel requirement. We've not added any personnel, not had to come and ask for any of those things. The only changes we've got are very minor. Looks like in retirement contributions, the workers' comp, and I think it's under a miscellaneous expense, which is funds that we sent to the region for the work of the regional courts and the regional presiding judge. Now, this does not yet incorporate any kind of salary increase, if there's going to be one, either a percentage increase on the salaries, or if it's going to be a flat rate. We've got to deal with all the counties and find out what they're doing. Some counties may be permitting a salary increase for personnel. Some counties may not have any increase at all. Some counties have historically had a one-time lump sum kind of a payment scheme along those lines. We don't have that worked out from any of the 5 counties yet. I think B County, which is on a fiscal year that's different than everybody's calendar year, they're the first ones, and we're still trying to negotiate, find out what's happening with the other counties, and trying to have, since all of our employees are San Patricio County employees, and the other 4 counties just send some support funds on a proportional share. We try not to take advantage of what's happening in any one county, but try to assess that that's happening district-wide before we make any decisions on what we're hoping to have happen with our employees and their compensation.
Salary, regular full-time employees and part-time and temporary help, that's all subject to the San
These-
Patricio.
Well, what comes out of our district court, like our court reporters, court administrators, those folks, that's in, that's item, or
Professional
line number
services.
116. That's the 127. The 103, 110, 115, those are folks that are employed here in Aransas County. They're bailiffs, part-time of accounting for the constables, folks that actually work in our courts. Those are not direct employees of the district judges. They're not our court reporters. They're not our court administrators. Those are other folks that are assisting in the work at the
Who
district
pays them?
court.
If you're over here and you're talking about our bailiff or whatnot, who pays these folks?
Right,
We do.
they do. Aransas County does.
But
Constables
you've
are
got
elected.
them in your budget.
But yeah, well, they charge our budget for the work that they do in our courts.
Really?
Yes.
Then you bill it back to us.
No, it's separate and apart from what goes to San Pat County to pay for the overall operation of the district courts and district court personnel.
Well, you've lost
So
me.
Jackie, where do those funds go back to the general fund? So if you have a bailiff and it's already budgeted somewhere else, and then they're
We split their
technically
time up.
reimbursing for their time, or?
We split their time up when they're paid. If they work in the district court, then it's charged to district court, so
Yeah.
their salaries are split between their job duties.
If they're spending 40% of a pay period working in the district court for the district judges, then 40% of their salary for that pay period comes out of this budget rather than out of
Out of their.
a constable's
let's say
budget or a
We bill it
sheriff's
to you
department.
and then we have to pay you though,
We just
based
split
on
it.
what's, just makes me like,
No,
we're-
sir, the
we're-
money that's in the 116 is their court reporters and their admin staff is what that
well,
is.
I misunderstood because he was saying some of the people over here that are doing these
I
duties
thought
and
he
you're
said
billing them for that.
103 and 115.
Right, 103
People who were-
and 110 is actually the one that the bailiffs come out of. Is the
Again,
110.
116 is the court reporters, court administrators, folks that are under the direct supervision and payment of the 5-county budget that we have.
But you're just
103,
moving it back
110,
to keep
115.
track of it.
Those are folks that are Aransas County employees that are employed either the sheriff's office, the constable's office, someplace else within Aransas County's structure, but they're just charging that to the district court budget
No, but in your books. you're
because they're
charging it
working
It's
for
an
the
in and
district
out,
court.
that's what I'm saying. It is-
Well, you know,
I agree with you.
what
I can
had
give
happened
you a
in the
call for
past was
what the
that
court budget
we were using deputy sheriffs. we were using constables in the district court, which meant that the district judges and the district court budget was not being charged off any of those expenses, even though they were doing work for the district courts. Somebody said, well, that's not fair. That's not really accurate. If they're working in the district court, not doing their constable duty, not doing their deputy sheriff duty, that ought to be allocated out of the district court's budget.
So their total salary is not showing up either here or on the county. It's being
No.
the portion that where they're working for the county, it shows up in their constable's budget or the
Right.
sheriff's
Again,
budget.
if
But
they
they're
spent-
working in your court,
say
it
they
shows up
spent-
in your budget.
Say they spent 40% of their time working in the district courts.
Right.
Then 40% of their total expenses will come out of the district court. 60% will come out of sheriff's office, constable's office, wherever their primary employment comes from.
Where do we see that come back in revenues or reimbursements or?
It doesn't come back in
No, it
revenues,
doesn't
but you're
come
just
back in.
splitting
It's
an
just
expense between
a
departments.
personnel cost, just like our other personnel.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
You
Yeah.
won't see their full salary in this constable's office, for instance. You'll only see 60% of it, you'll see 40% of it in Judge Flanagan's.
It's not a revenue for anybody.
No.
It's just if you look at both of the budgets, you got that person's overall salary, 40% comes out of the district court, 60% comes out of the constable's office.
But Jackie, didn't you say you send a bill over?
No, sir, we
You don't
don't,
bill?
we
You
don't
don't
bill?
bill them for that, no, sir.
No bills are sent from Aransas County to Sampat County for any of this. The only thing that happens is that Sampat will send a bill for Aransas County's pro rata share
Okay.
of the overall district budget.
What are the professional services? Refresh my memory on that.
Professional services, things like visiting judges.
Have you had
Um,
any visiting judges this year?
Yeah, we've got one visiting judge that's assigned to one case in particular that I know of. She's been working this year on that one particular case because the sitting district judges recused themselves from it. It's also coming out of that, the county has contracted with an organization for capital murder defense.
Right.
That premium, so to speak, is part of the professional services as well. Offhand, I can't think of anything else that might be professional services that's not taken care of in some other budget. The psychologist and mental health experts for somebody that needs a psychological evaluation, that's got a separate line item. Since I've been on the bench, we've taken out of professional services any expenses for court reporter services. We've got a separate budget for that I'll talk about in just a minute. We used to have that come out of the general budget, but since I came on the bench, I noted that we've got a pile of money that's available for that ought to be able to take care of that. So I think basically it's those two items, that capital defense and visiting judges that come out of professional services. I can't think offhand of anything else that would come out of that.
Jackie, I know this year that the court took up and has approved that capital defense insurance.
Yes, sir.
And where is that charged? In other words, what department did that go into?
That would go into the district court.
It did go into the district court.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
And it's I believe it was like $7,000 or $8,000.
right. They paid it?
We paid it, well, the court's budget paid it, the district court's budget.
But who wrote the check?
We fund
We
the
did,
district court.
because we fund the district court.
So you charged it against the district court?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
it's kind of like an attorney's fee.
Oh, let's don't go there.
No, I mean, well, basically it's an insurance policy
Oh, I know.
and get against a capital murder case so that they step in and we don't wind up having to pay huge amounts of money for court-appointed attorneys on a capital case that can last for months, assuming we ever get to have jury trials again.
I'm just trying to figure out though, why we have to run all this the way we're accounting for it. I'm not suggesting that I don't agree with the spending of the funds, but I mean, but it looks to me like we're just making busy work here.
Well, what it does is it recognizes all expense for the county court, so it's all in one place and it knows what the county court costs.
You do
Unfunded
the
mandate,
true
and we're
cost
just
of what
keeping
the
track
court-
of that mandate.
Well, and again, where that came from is a number of years ago, somebody at the sheriff's office, somebody at the constable's office said, look, this is all money that's coming out of my budget, but I'm not doing my constable work. I'm working at the district courtroom. That ought to be charged off to the district court. I was fine with that. Made no change in the bottom line for that office. It just, you got different funds that are
Constables,
being
that's
added
if
together
they
for
do
that.
It's above there.
You know, some folks like truth in government and having a representation, Commissioner Smith, about where that money's being spent and for whom it's being spent. If you have objection to that, then you know, that's up to you and your directions for
I guarantee you there's probably not 1 in 1,000 that understand the numbers the way they're being put together.
This just gives a clear picture of what that
What
court,
it
the
costs-
district court costs. the
Cost to
county.
have.
Yes.
Because the
Okay,
constables
fair
don't
enough.
get
All
any
right.
extra money. They're just part of their job.
No, the bottom line for the constable's office or for those deputies that are doing their deputy work and also working part-time or sometime at the courthouse, it's just a truer reflection of how they're spending their day. They're not spending all of their day on patrol. They're not spending all their day serving papers out at the constable's office. Part of their day is spent for the district court.
Good.
So this is, I assume that that's what this is designed to reflect.
Yes.
How long do you figure you're going to continue to do court online?
We got a direction from the Supreme Court and Court of Criminal Appeals, the Office of Court Administration today, that we are not to have any jury trials, including jury selection, through the month of August. I personally think it's, very likely it's going to be a lot longer than that unless things drastically improve.
How can you hold court if the accused has the right to face their accusers?
Judged by your peers.
Video?
I have a very difficult time conceptualizing how a jury trial can be effectively conducted remotely.
Yeah, especially from the jurors. The jurors, you don't know who's sitting next to them off camera.
Right.
All right, we get
Right.
long face here.
There are, as you astutely recognize, there are a lot of procedural hurdles and safeguards that we just can't ensure when we're doing things remotely.
All right, Judge, what else were you going to bring up?
The only other thing I've got is on page 130. There is a special dedicated fund for court reporter service fee. This is the one that I talked about. I brought some attention to when I came on the bench here. Along with the filing fees, both criminal and civil cases, when a case gets filed, there is a small portion of that fund, those fees that go to a court reporter service fee. Rather than having expenses for a visiting court reporter or an indigent record that's prepared by a court reporter and have that that expense go to the county out of the general fund. We've now, for the last few years at least, it looks like, been using this court reporter service fee to keep that because it's a dedicated fund for those activities. We've kept all of those expenses coming out of this fund, and it's still got $60,000 or $80,000 last time I checked in it. So we've got plenty of funds to take care of all of those expenses rather than have that be coming out of the general fund. It's not a lot. It may be anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 or $7,000 a year, but that's $4,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 that.
How do we free up that $97,822? That's the amount of the fund balance.
Even more than I thought. We can't free it up because, as I said, it's a dedicated fund.
What's it dedicated to? What's it eligible for?
Court reporter expenses. Court reporter expenses, over and above what is, budgeted. So we can't use that fund to supplant anything that the budget's already got. But if we've got any extra expenses, like if we've got a, indigent defendant or an indigent, civil litigant that can't pay for a record on appeal, court reporter gets to prepare that, but the payment for that comes out of this fund.
So it's strictly limited to a court reporter fee.
Court, yes,
It's unbudgeted.
yeah, it's a court reporter fee that can be used for those purposes, as I understand it, only for those expenses.
But if you
And only for
decrease the
district
court
court.
reporter budget, could you then apply the 97,000 to cover the
Well,
shortfall? You just
frankly, we don't
created?
have a court reporter budget other than the salary for the court reporter because we've been utilizing this
Could you
this
use
fund
it
right now.
for that, or at least for a year?
This is basically indigent.
I don't believe so.
No.
No. Again, that, the salary expense is a county expense out of the general fund, as I understand it. These, extra funds are available only for these extra activities or expenses. So again, hiring a visiting court reporter, if the court reporter's not able to, work, for a day or for a period of time, or we got a visiting judge to come in, that visiting judge we pay for, in those, other professional services, but the court reporter comes out of this dedicated fund. Again, if there's an indigent record that needs prepared, civil or criminal case, the cost of that record comes out of this fund rather than the general fund.
And is this fund for the whole district or? just-
No, this is just for Aransas County. I've got similar fund, or the district courts have similar funds in each of the counties. And we've made sure that, just like we're doing for Aransas County, none of the county's general funds are going to these expenses, since we've got a well-funded pot of money that can be used for this. And since we can't use it for anything else, by golly, we need to make sure that we're using it for this.
It also is for county court at law. It's not just district court. This does cover county court at law also.
Okay. It makes me feel better.
What's the source of the revenue that goes into that fund real quick?
As I said, it's a small portion of any filing fee in the district court or the county court,
Okay.
criminal or civil.
Okay, any other questions for the judge? Not, thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you all very much.
One judge to the next, because Mike Gear's on vacation, his budget didn't change, right?
Right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I essentially have two budgets to talk about. Of course, the court at law judge budget, and then the collections budget, which is much smaller, but we treat it separately. The budget for the county court at law this year is proposed a $68,000 increase. And I would real fast point out that 56,000 of that is for indigent attorney fees. We keep it pretty close to the vest on other items in the budget, but that one is just best guess. The budget
That is
does
an
not
unfunded,
include.
that is an unfunded mandate, right?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
It sure is. And I wanted to point out, as Judge Flanagan did, this doesn't include any kind of pay raise, be it merit or across the board or whatever. My understanding is that's done separately from this.
Yes.
All right. The $56,000 increase, if you will, for attorney's fees, it's just very unpredictable. What we did was took 2017, 18, and 19. We took the average of those 3 years and we added 10%. Is that right or wrong? It's just
It is.
a guess. It's kind of the best we could do.
Jackie, how much have we spent year to date? This year?
I don't have it with me right at the moment.
We've spent about 95,000 year to date, which
The first
is
6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And what we're experiencing, every year is different, but in our CPS cases, for instance, we had an increase in the number of filings last year. Those things play out over a year. The biggest expenses come at the end of those cases. And then, of course, they frequently get appealed. And we're generally successful on those appeals, but we have to pay for the attorneys for that as well. We also this past year have had another mandate, if you will, or expression that when we have, as frequently happens, missing fathers, we just don't know where they are. And nobody else does either, or at least they're not giving us the information. We have to appoint attorneys to represent those absent fathers, to make sure that every stone is overturned to try to locate them. Even if they haven't had any contact with that child for 10 years, we still are required
So
to do.
we've got attorneys that we're having to pay, and he doesn't even know who his client is. Never met him.
That's right.
Where
The
does
kid
that
doesn't know who
item
his
come out of
father is.
that, Judge?
I'm sorry.
Where does the ad item for the children come out of it? The ad item for the children?
It comes out of that same amount.
The same.
Right, right. Let's see, what else did I want to point out?
Got 6,000 for conference and dues.
Conference and dues increased, and that includes one conference for the court manager, one conference for the court reporter, and the rest is me. And that is, the increase is not an increase in conferences. It is an increase because the sponsoring entities for those seminars in the past has significantly funded or reimbursed us for attendance at those. Well, that's out the window.
If the court reporter submits a bill to us to go to one of those, can we run it through that fund that we just looked at?
I don't know, but it would be a good question to ask our auditor. I don't know.
We would have to look at the statute on that and make sure that that is an eligible expense.
It's a bill from a court reporter.
That's true, but make sure that it'll cover their
And,
conferences.
and as long as we're talking about that, we probably ought to go back and look at it because we're having an increase in court reporter expenses because of the appeals. And, they have an absolute right to an appeal. And if they appeal, we not only have to pay the attorneys, and by the way, we don't have any attorneys in this county that do appeals, that kind of work. So we're talking about out of county. And, but they, of course, want a copy of the court reporter records of all the proceedings for the past year to review for preparation for that appeal. So our court reporter expense goes up.
Those typically will get charged to
Okay.
the reporter.
And what we have done in the past, and these are small things compared to the 56,000 for the attorneys, is the court reporter expense. We have, in order to attract court reporters, because we don't have any in this county, then they come from Corpus, is we wind up paying mileage.
Yeah.
It's an unusual arrangement, but nonetheless, I don't know where we'd be without it. And there's a court reporter shortage. The courts in Corpus are hurting for court reporters. So, but with Zoom, the actual mileage expended is decreasing. I don't know what it is so far this year, but it certainly is decreasing. And that's an area I would look to continue in the future.
Professional services.
Professional services. Out of our budget, primarily it's going for doctors for psych exams, for psychological exams. We have motions we have to deal with, are they competent to stand trial?
That's,
So is that is based upon your experience this year? How did you come up with $4,750? Because it's been running 1,500. I don't know what the actual expenditures are.
I don't know what that actual expenditure is so far this year.
And food, all of a sudden it just magically appears on our budget. Food,
Travel and meals,
no, up above.
I don't,
Supplies.
Under supplies, office supplies, law books, food.
I see it. We put that in there. I've never used it. That's not to say I wouldn't for a jury situation that you just don't know until it happens. Most of my jury trials are short. They're 1 or 2 days. When are they going to start again? I don't know. September 1 at the earliest, but I'm not optimistic about that.
You pay for jury lunches?
No.
I've never had anybody pay for my lunches.
Would that be like if you sequestered the jury or something?
It would, or
Leave it alone.
occasionally what can happen is, not lunch so much as an evening meal. If I'm in here and I've got a jury and they're deliberating and they say it's 6 o'clock and they say, we'd rather keep working and maybe we can finish this evening rather than have to come back the next day,
Bringing sandwiches.
then it might be appropriate to do that.
But to your knowledge, you've never had to do that before.
That's correct. I've been cheap about it so far.
Do you see, it seems like on all serious cases that are on a lot of serious cases are now requiring psych exams. Do you see that getting more and more all the time? Because we've had so many instances in the state and federal jails where you've had somebody.
I'm trying to decide if it's limited to serious cases. I think it is increasing, but I think that's a reflection of the increase in mental health problems we have just in the general population.
So it would be reasonable to assume in the next several years that cost is going to increase.
Yes, sir. And I think I don't know if the sheriff's been in yet or not, but if you ask him about the mental health cases sitting in our jail, he'll tell you
Yeah,
what kind of load we
we
have.
heard about those yesterday.
If there's nothing else on that, I would just point out the other smaller budget is for our collections effort. And it's an overall increase of $3,800. I would point out that that includes absorbing a $6,000 budget for a maintenance agreement, which was previously carried in IT and it got moved over to this budget. So it's a pretty tight budget. Collections are down as you would expect. We pressure collections by either calling people in that aren't paying, and we after appropriate procedures, put them in jail. Well, we can't do that right now. And secondly, we push them on community service. Well, there's not hardly any community service opportunities available right now. Or we increase their fine. Well, if they're not working, it doesn't matter what the fine is. So we're really,
Yeah, if they know they're not going to go to jail, they're not going to pay the fine.
we're really treading water right now on that.
If you put them in jail, how does that help our collection?
Can't put them in jail.
It doesn't help our,
Understand right now.
it only helps if the threat of putting them in jail encourages them to find a way to pay.
But when you actually put them in jail, it costs us another $65 or $70.
Absolutely. And some of them don't mind a bit.
Better living conditions.
Well,
Over the last few years, it's kind of amazed me, just people I meet on the street that might have fines that just like, if they get to be a certain amount, well, I'll just go set it out in jail. Like it doesn't even concern them. They just, it's a matter of fact, if it gets over a certain amount, I can't pay it. I'll just go to jail and set it out.
it always amazes me the number of repeat offenders we have that can explain to me the jail credit system better than I can. And, the sheriff has control of some of that, the 2-for-1 option based on good conduct is strictly in the hands of the sheriff. That doesn't come from me.
Yeah, it's
Well,
crazy.
If it's down and out enough, you can't really put too much more pressure on them. They're already worse off than anything you can do to them.
All right, Judge, any other questions for him? Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Chris Randall isn't here. Or is he? Yeah, he's hiding behind that
He's
screen.
mad.
There he is.
The mask man.
Looks
How you
like
doing?
Zorro.
I guess I could be called worse things than Zorro. How are y'all this morning?
Is anything outstanding in your budget?
Yeah,
Holy
there was some
moly.
stuff I asked for some increases on. One of the big ones was parts. Everything's just getting more expensive. This year we've had a lot of just pretty high expenses on parts, and asked for 25,000 more for that. Everything just keeps going up as far as parts. There was also some equipment I was looking for. One of our trucks, I wanted to replace. It's a F-150. It's about close to 140,000 miles. It's about 10 years old. Transmission starting to slip on it, and it's just age is catching up with it. And I think I wrote in 35,000 for that. And then one of the couple other things, we need a new welding machine. We have two welding machines. We have a stick welder and a MIG welder, and the MIG welder decided it didn't want to work anymore. It's got internal parts and it needs a replacement, it's not something that's repairable. I wrote in $4,000 for that. Just our regular hand tools, we've had a $1,500 budget this year. I wrote in $3,000 for that for next year. A lot of the hand tools and stuff we have, Mike and John had built or, we've been using them for a long time, and a lot of them are just.
Well, you were going to get you talked to us about getting a new analyzer or something.
Yes, I have that on here too. I can get into that. I wrote in, where's that? Yeah, $5,000 for a scan tool. A lot of the new the technology in vehicles is just rapidly advancing, and we've got a computer reader that'll talk to vehicles, but there's a lot of things that it won't do. We can't reprogram tire sensors. So on a lot of the new Dodge stuff, we're finding out it has to go to Dodge because the machine we have won't work on that. And there's just a lot of stuff we can't diagnose with vehicles with the machine that we currently have. And to get one that'll be sufficient for what we need to do is about $5,000. And
Chris, I got a quick question.
Yes,
How much
sir.
have you spent on repair parts in the first 6 months of this year?
I'm sorry.
How much have you spent on repair parts the first 6 months of this year?
Oh, about $100,000.
Is that about right, Jackie? We used to be, you would put in here the first 6 months or 5 months or whatever was available so that we could look at the
Yes.
reasonableness of some of these things. I mean, but it's not there this year.
No, it's not there this year. Sorry.
We're going to get it back.
Next,
Next year, well, I'll be
no,
gone.
no.
Thank you.
No, Next meeting.
So you think you spent 100,000 on parts and you're going to have to, in the first 6 months, and you're only asking for 165 for next year?
Well, I didn't realize we'd spent that much when I put this together.
I'm not sure whether that's good or bad.
No, it's yeah.
And the $60,000 down there, machinery and equipment, there's a truck in there?
Yes, sir.
And what's the rest of it?
The truck was 35 and the rest was 25.
You've never spent that much on other stuff. I would assume back in 2015, that was a truck purchase as well.
No, we have two trucks. That was our service truck.
I mean, we've been running it around between $2,500 and $5,800 a year. If you just kind of built that up just to be safe,
I'm sorry, can you say that
if
again?
you just kind of built that up and padded it to be safe?
Are you asking if I have done that?
Yeah.
No.
So you've got an actual detail to come up with that 60,000.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I have a truck for 35,000. The scanner is 5,000. Welding machine is 4,000. And then also a tire machine. We have a tire balancer, which we replaced 2 years ago. And then our tire machine, which is about 15 years old. We got them about the same time, and the tire machine we keep fixing and keep having to work on, and that was about $7,000.
The truck's got 140,000 miles on it?
Yes, sir. It's like 138,000 and change.
Is it running good?
The transmission slipping on it.
What's the new transmission cost?
On that one, about 2,800.
I don't have any more questions. Jeff.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Randall? All right, thank you, Chris. Stephanie, come on up.
Good morning.
Stephanie, some time ago, we got notice that our costs was supposed to go up, and we disputed that, and somewhere in my office, and I'll have to go look, is the paperwork that says, I think the city came up with, our share was 190-something thousand.
196.
Yeah.
And the
And
numbers that you furnished us showed that we should be paying 174.
do you have any new numbers of what you think we should be paying?
I don't. Based on that, y'all, I guess y'all had an agreement, the city and county did when y'all did the contract back in 2014, early 2015. And that was strictly between y'all. I've gone back and tried to look for something that stated that we had it and we don't. That was
It was
something.
based on calls back originally. And even using a 5-year average, we can't come up with 196.
And because I don't know actually have ever seen the agreement, so I don't know where they're getting their numbers from. So I don't have any input on that, unfortunately.
I got another question. Let's assume, for instance, that our emergency room opens back up again here, and you don't have to transport all the way over to Corpus. That's going to free up some of your personnel, it's going to free up some of your vehicles, right?
It should decrease some of our extended call times to where we're not leveling out as much. Yes.
Got any idea how much that would actually save in terms of cost?
Depending on, say, if we have an ER that is based off like SPAWN system or the CCMC system that can actually take governmental insurance that we can actually go to, it should decrease us quite a bit. But to say some of them, we still would have to transport, whether it be like an OB or something like a major trauma from an accident where they need to be in the OR. We still have to go straight into Corpus for those situations for the patient.
Yeah, but the vast majority of your calls that you take the emergency room over there are to a local. I mean, that's the vast majority of them.
It shouldn't be any different than when we had Care Regional. We were still busy. Care Regional took quite a bit of our call volume, but and we
Well,
still
Portland's taking
transported
quite
quite
a
a
bit of
few.
your call volume right now, aren't they?
I'm
Portland-
sorry.
The Portland ER, aren't they taking quite a bit of your call volume?
It's about 50-50 right now. With all the COVID stuff, it's kind of, they're limited on what they can take because they're having to try to adjust, and they're not just taking hours, they're taking tri-counties, they're taking Sinton and some of the surrounding areas as well. So they get inundated just like the Corpus
The current
hospitals.
contract that we have, is this a year-to-year contract now?
I believe so.
Yes.
So that if in fact there was a change in where the usage of your service, we're never more than 12 months away from getting an adjustment.
Right.
Stephanie, what's happened in the area that either has been or is planning on being annexed by Aransas Pass? Are y'all still making calls?
Very few
Yeah.
on the current. I mean, there's maybe been 3. Actually, Tri-County has been picking up a lot more calls over here because of Code 3 being shut down and our call volume has increased. So it kind of balances it out at that point. Actually, they're over here more than,
I mean, is Aransas Pass, are they still using Tri-County?
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, I asked that question 4 months ago,
Mhm.
I guess. At the time, there had been 4 calls in the last 12 months that went to Allegiance.
Yeah. And I think I had
It's really
3 of
surprising. I
them
thought it'd be a lot more.
last year. And then we've had about 3 this current month. And those are mutual aids, one to Ingleside, a couple
You're
different.
backing up the other,
Right.
and they're doing the same for you.
Yes. It kind of balances it out because they're over here more than we are over there.
Judge, I know that they're supposed to be reporting, I don't know whether it's on a quarterly basis, response times by district here,
Yeah, they talk once a month.
once a month now. Are
No,
those,
it's always been once.
are they doing all right as far as the contract goes with
Yes,
response time?
yes. They've had a few hiccups, but that's because of either fog, breakdown of equipment, or wrong address. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, I checked, there are multiple calls, about what, 20% where they're having more than 3 calls at a time.
So if I see if I got this right, when we asked the question about the difference in the billing or the split of it, you're saying you don't have any information on that? at
I
all?
don't have any information on that. That is
That's between
an
us and the
agreement
city.
between the city and the county.
Have we gotten an explanation from the city on the number?
Not since we argued about the first one. We haven't changed any amount that we're paying them, so.
I
Get it.
think part of that conversation when we had it back, I think it was in January, was when they did the numbers based on the year before, 12 months before, because the nursing homes hadn't completely opened up after Harvey. That's why the city's call volume was decreased and that's what the budget changes were based off of. That is what I remember of the conversation, but the actual agreement as to what the city and county had, I have never seen that.
Well, the agreement's not very explicit as to what period of time this is based upon. I mean, this was the first time in 5 years. The original budget or split was done on a 5-year basis. But if we look at the numbers of calls, I mean, consistently, I tried to figure as many different ways as I could to justify the 196. Could never get there.
I agree. I don't know on that
Well,
Doesn't have
aspect.
anything to do with them. It has
Yeah,
to
we have
do
to get back with the city and figure this out. Any further questions for Stephanie?
Really appreciate y'all.
All right, thank
Jackie,
you,
I think we have
Stephanie.
another problem with columns not footing. Some of the changes don't seem to match the previous columns.
No
Look
further
at the
questions.
Bottom line, it's about a $100,000 change.
Are
that shows
you-
up as a
Looking at,
page 124, bottom right. It can't be $438,000 difference. It looks like more like 100,000.
Well,
And some of them are up above, but they don't, the change from the variance
we're,
doesn't match.
well, you got a $450,000 positive change in code 3. We're not budgeting anything
That's the
there.
Right.
total health,
So
we're
that's
looking
the
at the
The
total
vertical may
healthcare
flip,
sales
but
tax.
but look at the total. It
Is
goes
there
from,
any more questions for Allegiance?
no.
Okay,
this is
thank
just
you.
a question for Jackie. Jack, see, look,
Judge, are you going?
those two numbers are about 100,000 apart.
Get some more
We're not a
information.
$450,000 variance.
Oh, between here
They
and
just
here.
aren't- there's no
David
foot.
Reed, come on up.
Only
We're
you
able to
Well,
guys,
you stay
maintain
away
social
from it.
distance.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
only you department heads that want to rob us.
That would be me.
Okay.
You don't look like Zorro though.
Okay, I think the big increase in my budget is for equipment.
Yeah.
We, we haven't had equipment in the budget since Harvey.
None of your
and-
equipment's cheap
And
either.
my equipment is not cheap. Yeah, I mean, it's usually hundreds of thousands of dollars for something. I don't know if you saw the list of what I'm asking for, but the big stuff, crew truck, dump truck, mower decks, recycler, and a tanker. And that is 570,000.
You told me it was gonna be less than $500,000.
Well, I think I told you, I'm sure you'll give me less than $500,000.
But all that money's coming out of your reserve fund. None of that money comes out of the general fund. Comes out of your reserve.
It doesn't come out of the general fund.
It comes out of your reserve.
If it comes out of my budget unless it gets to the point where I need to have it and reserve is what I have to do.
Right.
I mean, I'm not recommending it come out of the reserve at this time, not yet anyway. You know, Chris talked about his parts bill going up. That's probably a lot to do with my old equipment. You know, some of this stuff is, 20 years old and
Been in the shop a lot.
So
And,
if you buy new equipment, we can reduce his parts budget?
absolutely. I'll let him know that.
Well, I'm glad we saved some money somewhere here.
Yeah, but like that recycler, they're welding new teeth on it right now and it's thousands of dollars just for the teeth. And then we use them, they break off again. And it's a vicious cycle.
Does Chris keep like a itemized log on each vehicle? Where he can tell you on that particular vehicle what he spent in a period of time?
I believe he does, yeah.
$570,000. That's a drop in the bucket. Right.
Yeah, it's gonna run your, your fund balance from about 1,300,000 down to less than $500,000.
If that's what we need to do. But
So you start building it back up again. Maybe Jackie
With all
will
this
come
new
up with,
equipment,
with
yeah.
the,
put it back up.
with the depreciation fund for you. I'd sure like to see that.
That, this will be, ideal for what he's looking at.
He's the poster child for that particular project
Exactly.
right there.
Exactly.
What about
There
setting-
are
setting up
also still
depreciation
some
fund
funds
for
in the
electric
bond
vehicles?
issue that he has, if he chooses to use those funds
Right.
to fund some of this.
Have-
Probably another couple of $100,000.
Have they been allocated on this here?
No, sir. No,
Okay.
sir.
So it might
This
be a little bit
also-
better than
So
we
I-
think. You may only
so-
be down to 700,000.
Maybe.
How much you talking about? in
Yeah.
the
There
bond?
probably, he has about another couple, 200,000 left of what was allocated for the road and bridge. We also, this does it doesn't have anything additional in the ad valorem tax. It is based on last year, so there will be some increase there, should be.
Well, I know he wants to go down on his tax rate though.
Do you think he wants to just?
He's been
Give it
doing
to the
a lot-
general
he's been
fund?
doing a lot of stuff since the storm,
We have done a lot of stuff. I mean, we've gone through a lot of things, the hurricane, the floods, I don't know that COVID is causing us to increase our spending, but we're building a lot of roads.
Y'all done a
drainage.
lot considering the amount of rain we've had.
Yeah.
too. That's,
Um,
you did a good job on that.
And
Thank you.
One of the
I'm
things-
certainly looking forward to the next drought.
relative to the Allegiance deal, he's fixed a lot of roads where, the areas that we were having where they were basically go down the street and have to turn around.
Mhm.
He's actually fixed a large number of those roads where they can go directly to the source.
Now you're gonna get $38 million.
David, how much of this
Maybe, we'll
projected
see. 2020
budget or improvements to like navigation district property, city of Rockport, town of Fulton? How much of that work have we done this year?
We've done some work for all three of those.
But I mean,
entities.
You budgeted for 228,000 for this year.
Yeah.
Are you gonna, is that a fair number?
Yeah. I think, yeah, we should be pretty close to that.
But
We've already got.
Have
some
they
of that.
already requested that amount?
Yes.
I mean, I know they're
Well,
obligated to give us
the-
a request ahead of time.
Yeah, they haven't really requested that amount for next year. My conversation was about the same as they did this year, so that's kind of what we're looking at. They haven't actually told me what they're going to want. They probably haven't figured that out just yet, but they're gonna want something.
The last time we did work for the ACISD was back in 2016, but you got them down for 50,000 next year. Is that a project that they've already talked with you about?
Parking lots, we've done work for them this year. And they've got some more parking lots that they want to get done also.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions for Mr. Reed and his wish list?
Under the revenue, you talk about fine collections there. How are the fine collections coming?
Where you at?
So that $140,000 that we got budgeted for this year we're not going to hit that?
I would be surprised if we hit that. That will have to be looked at because fines are that's where we're getting hit the hardest. Sales tax seems to be doing fine, but fines are really,
Interest on investments is probably lagging behind as well, right?
it is going to start, yes.
Okay.
I think everything's dropped.
Forget about that
recently.
extra bulge of
Next year.
200,000.
I'd like to see you get with Valerie and and I know we've talked about it and try to get our policy changed where, I mean, we have a large amount of stuff that's getting abandoned in the road right away, and somehow identify at what level and get us the ability to pick it up and either take it to an impound, get it off the street, whether we
Okay.
have to come up
Yeah.
with a place to store it for
I
the
think-
amount of time that people have to come and reclaim it or whatever, but
Right.
it just seems like more and more you have people that are just junk on the, out
That's,
in the right of way.
that's true. We're
We have to
doing,
go through the
we're-
hoops you gotta go through to get it.
we're doing some of that work this morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's ongoing.
Okay,
Johnson Street.
go to flood control.
Oh, I don't know that I have anything particularly different in flood control.
Well, that particular fund balance seems to be just sitting there pretty stable.
It is. I have several drainage projects that we're working on, hopefully getting the easements finalized for, and they'll be big ticket projects. We've done several big drainage projects this year and probably will still be working on them this year.
How much of that fund balance, Jackie, is still outstanding under money that was borrowed, bonded money?
There's about
is-
500,000
So you got,
of that
But it's not
2016.
in this
It's,
fund balance.
it's
That
not in
is
here.
a separate account. That's in
so we
240.
probably need to clean that out.
What's the time?
It
frame that
it
we
is,
need to-
and I'm at the position
Should
now
have
that
already
I'm looking at
seen
these
that.
projects and I can't start just yet, but I know I'm gonna wipe that money out as soon as I get those projects underway.
Because we have some time constraints.
Right,
We're supposed to
Yeah,
have it.
there's.
yeah. And, you know, it might be best to just go ahead and try to spend it.
We need to use that
Yeah.
first.
How
just-
is the money that's coming? You're part of the grants that we got. I know a lot of them are gonna have to be contracted out, but are you gonna be able to do any of that, or is it gonna have to all be?
I
Contracted.
suspect most, if not all of it, will be contracted out. Probably not all of it, but it'll be kind of a juggling act. I'm a little afraid that we're gonna run out of enough contractors to do the work in the time frame that we have to do it. So I think Road Bridge probably is gonna have to pitch in just to expedite things.
David, the money that you're going out for equipment this year, any is that used for flood control purposes? Some of that equipment?
Um,
Great.
I don't have grade all on the list. Now this is probably all road stuff. I'll be glad to buy some more excavators if you'd like me to.
I was just trying to figure a way to cut down the impact on the other budget that you
Yeah,
have.
let me look at that again. I think,
Because that, if you're buying equipment that's going to be used for flood control, it seems to me that that would qualify to go through that
Yes.
fund.
You had asked about the fund balance on the capital for the drainage. They have about $750,000.
I knew it was up there still quite a bit now.
Right.
Got to spend it.
all right.
Can we use that money for, I mean, one of the biggest things we need are drainage under state roads.
Yeah.
Can we use that money for? those
Some of
type
those
of
drainage
projects?
projects, it depends on how the bond issue is written. Normally, Bob and them write them general enough that it would qualify.
One of
for,
our,
but we'd have
one of
to-
his biggest issues, in the whole county and other counties too, is that the state doesn't put enough drainage
Their
Right.
culverts are
So-
woefully inadequate.
through
You know,
through the road, so it creates a dam.
As you probably recall, we have that Bahia Bay drainage project that is in design right now.
So that could come
Right now, that construction of it is not funded. It's not part of the grants. Right now, it might be in the future, but right now it's not. But it is a project that's probably going to be close to $1 million to construct. And at some point in the next few months, when those plans are ready, you know, we'll have to figure out, do we put it on the shelf or do we find the money to?
Yeah,
to
the
build
problem
it?
is if you use other funds to do the project, then you can't recoup them in a grant.
True. I mean, I'd rather use other people's money. I
Right.
mean, but I'd rather get the project done no matter whose money I have to use.
What's your overall feeling about grants, David?
I hate grants.
Join the crowd.
Yes, it's inefficient.
Well,
I mean, yeah.
it's there.
All right.
It's just something I have to live
Any
with.
other questions for David?
No.
All right, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
418, maintenance agreements.
So the maintenance line's going up because a couple of years ago, we renewed for multi-year term. And so it's coming due for some of that equipment to get its renewals. And so I put that back into the budget to renew those items. And so that's basically the increase in that line. Mostly it's our Cisco contracts for the hardware.
We talked earlier, do you have anything in there for, like we talked about for additional monitors and things like that if you stay with Zoom?
I have put some in there for additional audio video, especially if we stick with Zoom for courts. I'm trying to get this a little more functional where more people can see it, where we get people in here, but also more just have better visual capabilities.
What does Zoom cost us?
Right now, it's only about 400 something a month, I think. But if we continue and the OCA, which is currently paying for like the district courts, county court, JP, if they stop paying for it, we're going to go up to probably about $5,000 a year. For Zoom.
Aren't there some other options other than Zoom? I was on with somebody and it was.
There are some other options, GoToMeeting, different services. I think for simplicity, Zoom is the simplest of all of them that we've come across, and that's partly why the state went with it. But I'd also not want to rock the boat and completely disrupt the courts that are currently using Zoom and that have figured out how mostly to use it by suddenly dropping a different software in it here, whereas the rest of the state's possibly using Zoom. So trying to keep that uniformity rather than be the odd man out.
Colin, your 2020 budget, line 570 for furniture and equipment, 260,337. How much of that have you spent in the first 6 months?
Of this year, I actually have not spent much of it. Most of that is dedicated to some of my large
But you don't have the
projects.
exact number?
I don't have an exact
I can
number.
give you a number.
It's dedicated to what, did you say?
It's dedicated to a couple of my large projects. One of the RFPs we're actually about to open this today.
What's an RP?
Request.
That's
for
such a great
proposal.
budgeted number.
For
And then projected for 2020, the same 260,337. And guess what? We budgeted the same amount for next year.
I did.
Is that just a convenience number or you got a detail on that? I mean,
That number, I rolled in, I put in some different projects into that figure, and I shifted some money that I didn't want to ask for less.
and you didn't ask for any more.
I couldn't come up with anything at the time that needed to be asked for right now. I mean, with COVID though, that could change.
What are the projects that you have coming up for?
Replacing quite a bit of our server architecture. Some of our servers are beyond their end of life.
What's end of life on a server? We talked about that about 3 years ago.
About 8 years. Most of these servers are pushing 12 years. They survived Harvey. Some of them did, and they're now pushing it to where we've got to get them out. And if we don't do something,
Do we have this, we put the U for grounding in several years ago, and I know that helped with dispatch and stuff like that. In whatever building we continue to be in, this one or a new one or whatever, is that something that in this budget that you need protection, surge surge suppressors?
So part of the RFP and part of the replacement of the server stuff is replacing battery backup equipment, surge suppression equipment that is attached to that equipment. We are planning to replace that as part of this project.
I know that we've gone to LED in our electrical stuff, and they highly recommend that we go surge suppression, good quality surge suppression on any LED stuff.
Right.
So for this building or another building, are we protected with surge suppression pretty well?
So this building, when they put it together, they did put in transient surge protection devices
CBSS.
on the main panels. In addition, our individual equipment racks have their own surge suppression equipment, as well as dedicated grounding. So
Colin, going forward, the fiber optic grant that I think has now been awarded.
the fiber optic has been awarded to do the engineering of it, to do the study.
How is that going to impact your budget?
So I am working on a project. I presented some of the numbers to the judge. If that moves forward, while it would be a 10-year type plan, we could ultimately save about $80,000 a year out of our overall telecommunications and network
Based on the fiber optic installation?
based on fiber optic installation. So
How long would it take to do the fiber optic?
10 years, I believe, is it?
it would take 10 years to get
do all of
to
it.
see the ROI, the return on our investment. To do the installation, some of the companies we've been talking to, they're pushing orders out. They're booked up through like August, but they can get it in the ground once. They got to go through tech stop permitting, make sure they're not going to be moving roads, right of ways.
A lot of that's boring.
A lot of that is boring underneath roadways, and if they're going to be digging up the roadway,
Similar
They
to
don't wanna
when
put
we saw the
fiber under
AT&T
it.
people doing.
very similar.
Running there.
AT&T has been running a lot of their new infrastructure.
Colin, do you mean it would take a few months to do the work and they couldn't start until at least August because they've got a backlog now?
Right. Yeah, if they pretty much, they've said if we don't get something going by August, it could probably push into 2021 before they actually start doing construction work.
So is there a possibility we can get it started by August?
That's up to, I guess, depends on how quickly the court can move and how quickly we can move contracts. That's
I'm just
But
looking at,
You've only got a grant for doing the design work.
so the design work for the grant that's part of William Whitson and long-term recovery, but that is a kind of a multi-jurisdictional. That is a much larger project. This internal project is just to get part of our fiber. The city is moving with a company to go ahead and have them to buy and install their fiber between their service center out off the bypass and their Laurel Street billing, where all their utility and their city yard and stuff is at. They're moving forward with that, and but the part of the larger study would be to include getting out to Lamar, getting out to the radio towers that the sheriff and fire departments and stuff are getting.
what about the courthouse, new courthouse location down there? Is that being
The new
considered?
courthouse location would already be served by fiber optic that exists in that area, because the county several years ago ran fiber between the public safety center and the old courthouse and the detention center. So we already have a fiber ring in that location that all we would have to do is extend it from the parking lot of the old courthouse where it's currently underground. We pulled it out and stubbed it up in the radio tower room right now. So they'd be able to pull that back through and take it over to the courthouse.
We have anything in here to get better service out to the transfer station?
So part of the fiber project that I was just talking about, not the grander study and engineering work, a part of this would get fiber to the transfer station and environmental health area, but it would also increase. We're in the process of getting new surveillance cameras finally replaced after Harvey took out most of the animal control stuff. And then we're adding some cameras because they've done some new construction, new fencing and stuff out there to put cameras on the gates and such, so they can keep track of people going in. We've already had instances where without cameras, people have gone in and helped themselves to the transfer station, and we couldn't collect on it because we don't know who actually dumped. So we're getting cameras out there now to rectify that.
They continually have severe cell phone issues out there.
They do. This would allow us to put to actually put wireless access points out there that, and they could use their cell phones over that wireless connection to make their phone calls and
And
stuff.
what kind of range does that have? I mean, I've
Inside
used that on my
inside the
phone, but
building.
it doesn't seem like it has much range at all.
Inside the building, if the wireless is done properly, you have multiple antennas throughout the building, and it would have a much better range.
I was in a place yesterday that mine wouldn't work, and it seems like a building with a lot of metal in it just
And that is
plays havoc on it.
it will, and that's where you have to put more antennas out. You have to spread them out to compensate for the extra metal in the building.
Is there any other way to get just regular cell phone service improved on that
To do regular
transfer station and surrounding area?
to do regular service, you would have to build basically an indoor repeater to to get the signal inside the metal building.
But I mean, even out there, out on the grounds, out in the open, you have poor
That would-
service out there.
Yeah, that would have to be up to the carrier, the individual carriers to put more towers up. And part of this fiber network could get carriers because they don't have to pay because that's the biggest thing is to put a tower up, you got to have connectivity to that tower. So if we have fiber in the ground, they don't have to pay that. It's a little bit cheaper for them to all they got to do is find a place, put a tower. So that's more going back to the grand study though, that we'd be able to lease excess and stuff that we're not using back to phone carriers and stuff and other communications people that want to use it and kind of make a revenue generating item for the county to self-fund that fiber network.
It sounds to me like we need to get started on this fiber optics that you have done some research on. Sounds like a viable deal. Any other questions for Colin? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
County Attorney, District Attorney. Hi.
Can this come down a little? There. Okay, thank you. So I'm here to present the 2021 budget, and I know Ms. Barnaby is also present if you have any questions about her current budget or previous year's budgets. So I'd like to start with the smaller budget, which is the law library. There are no employees and there are no requested changes there. I will let you know that moving forward next year, I will be looking at all of these expenses to see if there's anywhere that would be appropriate to cut. Since I don't have access to that information right now, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say that we are overspending. It might very well be the exact amount that we need. And I will move on to the County District Attorney's Office budget. The only changes that I requested have to do with the additional pay period. No additional spending is requested at this time. I will also be looking at all of these next year so that I'm able to give you a better assessment whenever we have this meeting next year. Are there any questions?
I had a question for Kristen. You passed out some information this morning.
I have a presentation. I just wanted.
Oh, okay, all right, fair enough.
Okay. And just to let you know, this current budget has the ability to cover all of the necessary expenses of the county attorney's office without adding an additional attorney to cover civil matters. I do not intend on adding any extra employees next year. There may be some reallocation of duties depending on turnover, but I do not intend on adding any additional employees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so some of you got the packet, and I don't think, Wendy, you did. Who else did I give? Or did you get one?
It's not much.
It's not much.
Yeah, no.
It's not much. So I know you're behind, so I'll be quick. So what is in the packet are facts. So currently that is what the office looks like. That's my, last minute, but truthful rendition of what it is. So you don't have to go back and look it up through all the job descriptions and everything else. Anybody have any questions about our office makeup? All right, so then caseloads. Attached to that packet is the OCA's representation of the caseloads. You'll see until about 2016, our caseloads were up about 54%, and then now they're sitting at about 33%. So just you can see that.
So we got the information through 2017, it was showing a 54.4% increase.
Excuse me, 2017.
But you're saying now 18 and 19 is
18
available?
and 19 brought it down because of course after Hurricane Harvey. So it's down to about 33%. If you look at
It's still a
2015
33% increase.
Yes, sir. The filings,
And our
yes.
population hasn't really gone up that much.
It has not.
What,
And
what,
the
what,
other counties in the district have gone down, is that right?
Either stayed stable or gone down.
why
some
do
of
you,
them
why
fairly
do you think
significant.
ours has gone up here?
We have quite a few more family law cases. We have quite a few more, we were talking about mental health. I believe frankly that people have more access to the court system now that we have an office here, and so they make use of it. We filed quite a few protective orders, CPS. I mean, there's just everything.
Well, family law cases, even through 17, were up 82%, but
Right.
but the criminal cases were up 67, almost
Right.
68%.
Right.
So two different areas right there.
Right. So I do think that's a, positive or negative of the access that people have to the court system.
Is that petty larceny or is that really, when you say criminal cases?
Did you say any larceny? Is that what you said?
Petty larceny.
Oh. I'm sorry, what'd you say? Larceny?
When you say criminal case, could you be more specific than what's here? mean,
So
these
I
serious
could.
Criminal cases.
I could pull up, I did not bring those with me, but from the OCA, we definitely do. CJIS does break out all those
I know the
cases.
uniform crime report that we used to look at,
Goes
we had a
down.
lot of quote petty larceny, which was
Right.
minor theft, which is pretty typical in a community that where you leave stuff out, you got a lot of visitors coming into your community.
Right.
And that's one thing.
Right. I do know our sex assaults are up because if you know, before I came in 2015, there were none in the city of Rockport.
The what?
The sex assaults. I do know those are up, and those take quite a bit of time, of course. But the standard, pretty much 70-80% drugs still rings true. It's just, there's more of it. So,
Yeah, according to our county court of law judge, that most of our CPS cases are drug related as well.
they are.
So certainly we have some drug problems in our county.
We absolutely do. But we have a new police chief, and that new police chief from Lubbock was the head of the drug task force or a drug task force while he was there. That's his specialty. Hopefully he'll get to where he's balanced and he can start working on that. No, he's still here.
He's still here.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe our drug cases will go up some more.
Well, they might, but you can't have it both ways, right? If you want it cleaned up, you might have to, it's gonna go one or the other. So just saying. All right, so those are the facts of the cases. The budget itself, and I thought when we started to prepare that we were supposed to include a 5% decrease. Is that wrong? I guess because no one else has done it today. So the only
5%
thing
decrease in what?
in our budget.
I
So
like that. Did we put that word out? kinda
I
like
thought
that
that's
5%.
what there, okay, never mind. Moving on from there. So with a new DA coming in, I wouldn't suggest decreases just because you're going to have all kinds of different things. And if you remember Charlie working on the budget when I started and everything, it's difficult. And it's going to be difficult to make all this work. So I would suggest leaving it. Moving forward, I was also asked to divide out how much time I spend on, or office spends on county attorney work versus district attorney work. So in your packet, you have a mugshot of Kevin Cullen. I talked to him about what he would quote or how much he would charge. He said about $250 an hour is standard. I think that's fairly inexpensive, but you would talk to him about who, what, when, and where. Then also another option for the court is Desiree Voth, works for San Patricio County. I included her job description. She gets paid about $95,000, give or take. And I can find that information for you. She does all kinds of things. She is just the judge's attorney. So she's also the PIO. You know, all of this is fluid. So it can all be done, you know, through that. So if I were estimating the two offices, at this point, taking out the misdemeanors, the county attorney portion post-hurricane takes about 2.25 people, which runs about $200,000. Just ballpark. So if you know, a criminal attorney usually charges about anywhere, well, in our county, $80 to $100 an hour. If you know the work that a county attorney does, it's about $275 at the cheapest to as high as $525, I found. Another thing that you want to calculate and put in there are things like the assignment I got last Friday, which is in the next 2 weeks, you need to tell us how FEMA can say that the matching funds, the $800,000 of matching funds that comes from the Bureau of Land Management does not come from appropriations. It actually comes from just money that is directed and diverted through the federal government, and therefore it can be used. Those kinds of things. There's all kinds of different things. Those are more specialty items, and I would suggest those are more on the higher end. So currently, as the county attorney, and know also that the law is the county attorney doesn't have to do anything. If you remember, it is only to respond. It's that one thing, only to respond to written questions. If you remember, I came to the commissioner's court way back when and said, what do you want me to do? And then it just kind of became hodgepodge. So our office does open records requests. Our office does specialized work, of course. Our office does contracts. So any department head or anybody who wants to talk about a contract, maybe they're not versed in that, or maybe they've got one that they want to get out of, whatever. So we work on contracts. We also do long-term recovery items. So William needed to know, facts, and we turn those around fairly quickly if we can. There was a water law question at one point. Of course, we also do questions and everything else from you guys. So that's really the gist of it, if you were going to divide it out.
So you think there's about $200,000 a year?
It'd be around, and if you hired somebody to do it, it would be about 100. If you used somebody like Desiree, right? If you could find somebody like Desiree who would do it. If you used a Kevin Cullen, he quoted 250 just because he knows our county. Typically, the county attorney work, like for instance, from Port Lavaca comes from Port Lavaca.
Kevin is the Victoria County attorney. Is that
He
right?
is by default. He is. And apparently, I didn't realize he'd been for so long.
But he doesn't attend meetings.
No, he does not. No, he does not. Victoria doesn't have, they have a criminal district attorney. They don't have a county attorney.
Wait a minute. Kevin is the elected county attorney?
No, he is not elected. They have only a criminal district attorney system.
Okay, all right.
So that's what he's done. So he does open records requests. I think when I said meetings, he said that if we scheduled meetings on Fridays, he could come. But not otherwise. But let Kevin, he can
Well,
handle all that.
He also has a house there.
That's what
already.
that's exactly what I was alluding to.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So there's that. It'd just be a matter of finding, Nueces County has their own attorney, obviously the bigger counties. But we're also talking about counties who have assistants for their commissioners. Right? Right. I saw
We don't even have offices.
I know.
know.
Not even in the new
They-
courthouse, not even.
Not a
So, right, there are all kinds of things to consider.
It's
And
mine and Jack's, our typical response, somebody needs an office larger, so we'll go ahead and forfeit ours to you. You
Right,
can have it,
right.
you know.
And your parking space too, right?
Yeah.
So.
Nobody will park in the mud but commissioners.
Yeah. So I'm open for any questions as you mull this and think about it and included the information. I can get more. Just let me know.
I would like
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want you to know that I have taken into consideration all of the responsibilities the county attorney's office needs to provide. I've spoken with other offices where they have joint county and district attorney's offices. I've looked at job descriptions and job postings, and I have every intention of filling my office with appropriate people who can fulfill all of these tasks. If I'm not able to personally come to every single meeting, someone will be there. Before you spend another $100,000 or $200,000, you need to really consider the fact that I've taken that into account.
Yes, ma'am.
When you say you'll have somebody from your office, will you have an attorney?
Yes.
Fair enough.
And please know, I only brought this up because somebody asked me to do this. I'm not.
I know.
making any
Yeah,
representation.
yes, I know. Thank you. All right. Agri-Life, Virginia, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good.
So we're just asking for 1,600 more. Do you want me to just,
Pardon me?
do you want me just to tell you what we're asking? Or do you want to just ask me questions?
What number?
54.
54.
What's the increase for?
$600 for cell phone allowance because we are using our cell phones constantly for our jobs, including doing things like making videos, doing Facebook Live, more digital education. And of course, contact with clientele through our cell phones. And then, and of course, that would be split between Megan and I. And 800 more for conference and association dues and 200 more for travel and meals.
Not going very far on $200.
We just need a little bit more.
Looks like that variance column on there is kind of screwed up.
Yeah, you don't really want 36,000, 35,000 more.
If you look at the screen, it is, it has been corrected.
okay, thanks.
And what I gave you this morning reflects that.
Okay, thanks.
Right, it's a total of 1,200. I can't see the screen, but sorry, it's a total of 1,600.
For personnel, it's a decrease of the 2117.
Okay. Don't have any
I don't have any
questions.
questions.
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, come on up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So when I submitted my budget request under 570, I had put in the $16,000. That was reflective of our match for the last grant that we just approved because it wasn't on last year's budget and I wasn't sure if it was going to make it for this year. So I was asking for next year. So you can scratch that. I no longer need that dollar amount.
Scratch what, the 16?
The 16 on 570. The only thing I might make a suggestion on is there's talk that there's additional funds coming. I don't know if it's going to be this year or next year, so I don't know if you want to go ahead and plan for it, but there's additional federal money coming down. We just don't know when or where. And talks just began on that. So I don't know if you want to include it in next year's
Boy.
budget, but if you don't need to, then
If you're betting on what's coming down from the federal government, don't bet too much.
right. The only other increase that I had was on 418 maintenance agreements. Our license and support fees they go up 4% every year. So from the time that we purchased our new equipment, you'll notice by looking, like in 2018, our maintenance agreements were 11,000. And then 2019 is when we paid for our license support on the new voting equipment and it went up. So I added up everything with the 4% increase. It brings us to the additional $8,000 in license and support money That also includes extended warranty for our voting equipment. So our vendor offers us an extended warranty to where you pay a flat rate, and anytime you have any equipment repairs, it's covered in that.
Well,
That's
wait,
something I
quick
didn't.
Question,
Go ahead.
the 20,500 this year, that's a good number?
No, it's not. We've already paid, well, actually, I don't have the column to tell you how much we've already paid this year, but everything we paid at the beginning. So I know we've already maxed out on that money. We're closer to 28, because if you look at 19, we had 26,531.
So essentially, we've been under budgeted for 2020, right?
Yes, sir.
If you look at the screen, I have up to year to date on the maintenance agreements, it's $20,427 is what we have spent.
That's for the 6 month, or are we gonna have
That's
any?
6 months, yes, sir. But as she said, most
Paid
of
in
that
the
is
beginning.
paid up front, so.
We normally
that's
pay it in
probably-
January, right?
It's probably pretty close to what all it's gonna be
For this year.
for this year. for
Right.
2020.
Well, then why is it going up 8,000 this? next
Because
year?
we've since added other programs that we're going to have to pay license and support on next year, such as our ballot by mail program that we're currently using, also on our Easy Vote system, which is what we do campaign finance on. So we have additional licenses that we're going to be paid next year. But
So it's
typically
not
we
really
get 'em-
just a regular maintenance cost. You've got different programs that
We have
you've added
different
to it.
programs. That's right.
Why didn't you say that to start off with?
Well, I apologize.
Well, it almost leaves me with the feeling that I'm not getting a straight scoop here.
I don't have a reason to lie to you. These are the figures that I've
I didn't-
received from our
didn't say that.
vendors. One thing that I have not paid for this year, because I didn't budget it in for last year, was the extended warranty on our equipment. We've since had repairs, and that's what I was getting at. We can either do an extended warranty where you pay a flat fee to cover all of the equipment, or you pay by the piece. So after the primary, I personally took pieces of equipment up to our vendor in Austin and dropped them off, and we paid out of pocket for that, and it cost about $600 per piece of equipment. So we have 50 pieces of equipment.
So what's the extended warranty cost?
I didn't bring in my quote. It's like $2,500
A year?
a year.
So you spent 600.
Right.
This is all new equipment.
It's all new, but things do happen. So the only other thing that I asked for was in 425, and that's for conference and association fees. As you guys all know, I did the SERA program and graduated last year, and I was wanting to put Julie through it. And the classes are not cheap. So this year they've canceled all the classes. So the money that we budgeted this year for her to take additional classes, they've canceled them all due to COVID. So I was hoping that to stay on schedule, that we could add a little bit more money to it so she could finish all her classes next year to stay on target to graduate the program next year.
And other than the increased knowledge, what's the advantage to the county to do that program versus what's just minimally required?
I mean, besides all the information that you get, you actually form these relationships with people who are in this line of professional, like we all get together, we talk about things. You form all these relationships to where, like, if we had an additional question or we wanted to bring in something new, you could reach out to other people. It's a constant thing. It's year round. Like, they ask us to turn in like something you did in your county, have like all these symposiums. It's just continuing education to keep us in line with all the election changes that are occurring throughout the United States, not just in Texas. So if I had to say, other than just the classes, I get more from meeting other people and learning from them than I do from a textbook. I think it would be beneficial for Julie to do it. Other than that, that's the only thing I've had additional on mine.
And the $16,000 in office equipment furniture, that's out, right?
That's out.
You've got an increase in personnel services. Is that pretty much just the 27 paycheck issue?
Yeah.
Where do you see that at?
The, the total up for personnel services, it's up about
It is.
46.
That's-
That's
that's for
additional.
that.
It's not that you've added salary, it's that we've got this year, we
Right.
had that special problem of 27 paychecks hitting instead of 26.
All right. Any other question for Michelle? If not, Michelle, thank you.
Thank you.
Rick Martinez, is he here?
No, sir.
Did they ask for more than what we had in there? usually?
Oh, yes,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course.
A couple 100,000 or?
I think it was like 80 or so.
85,000 or something like that.
So
And then,
far, our intention is to leave where it was.
then, Crime Stoppers, is that here?
No, sir, he's not here.
You know, I talked with Mr. Rikers after the election. He took me through his entire program, and it's a worthy project. And we haven't been making any contributions to it at all. Amanda, you have any experience with Crime Stoppers?
Not with our local, I've met, some people who are part of it, but I don't have any idea what they have budgeted.
I mean, have they been of assistance to you in the past?
In larger counties, not in this county personally. They are able to come in contact with, normal people who might not be comfortable going to a police department. And they can kind of anonymously give information, which is really beneficial to some people, especially if it's your family or loved one, and you're not comfortable, going to a police department. So, hey, Charlie, I go to the meetings, the Crime Stopper meetings, here and I agree, that that program is awesome.
Yeah, he took me through the program. I mean, they protect the identity very well.
Then the forfeiture
They're
account
just
pays
gonna-
for it now, do on the phones at school, and so we worked with the school to do that as well. So,
I made the offer to the city manager that if they would, still want to participate, I would certainly bring it up in Commissioner's Court here. I've never heard back from the city manager, but I do think it's a good program. And I'd like to get participation by the city as well. And would be more than happy to present to the Commissioner's Court, matching whatever the city puts in.
well, even without that,
It's
it's still
still,
a good
it's
program.
still
So,
really cost.
yes, the city had problems before, potentially, and, but that's all water under the bridge as far as I can tell. Jim is doing a great job, and it seems like.
Yeah.
It's very quick. It's very quick, it's very automated.
Judge McGinnis can't say enough about how great they are.
Do
in
we
this
have
county.
any funds other than the general fund that we could
Not
access from?
not that I'm aware of, I've looked at it, they have requested $5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have in the
Our
past, I
budget,
think,
so-
and I think at one time we might have.
There was
Gave
a
them money.
fund I looked at that was a special revenue fund, that kind of like the court.
Judge Flanagan, you have some
There's not any money. in
experience
there.
with Crime Stop?
Yeah, a number of years ago, I think, Aransas County and City of Rockport, we did supply some funds to Crime Stoppers. I used to be on the board back when I was a attorney. And I know that, we have a Crime Stoppers fee that's assessed, against almost all of the folks that are placed on probation, that, supports the program. And so the district judges, certainly, have approved that, probation fee, and the continuation of the program has been very successful and, again, all I can say is we support it certainly.
You supported it in the counties that asked you to put it in?
Yes, the two counties, that, we have that comprise the Tri-County Crime Stoppers, both Aransas and San Patricio County. I think those Crime Stopper fees are directed to that organization. In the other counties, I think that the Crime Stopper fee goes to the state umbrella organization. I can't say that for sure, but I think that's how
How much is the fee
it's $50.
per case?
It's a straight $50 for each person that's placed on probation, that against whom the assessed, the fee is assessed.
Okay.
And just another plug for Crime Stoppers, so they had their troubles for a while, and for whatever reason, probation wasn't also paying, so they do have some debt. And I say debt, not real debt, but there's some really good people that have
I agree. I was impressed the time I spent with it.
So even if it is a little bit more this time and less moving forward, or however, I think they'd be.
Have they made a request?
Yes, sir, I have 5,000.
5,000?
Well, sure, put it down and consider it when we're coming up with the
Put it
final
down there.
budget.
Once we start moving stuff out.
All right. So we'll put some money in that.
Okay.
We can incorporate it into the final budget, discuss it at that point in time.
Okay, if nothing else, we'll go to the auditors. That's where we really can cut some stuff.
Right.
Well.
I know one particular office up there. Don't shake your head at me, Tanner.
As far as our salaries go, we did
Wait a minute, what page number are you on right now?
page 29.
29, okay.
We did include the new employee. It is included in this budget. Other than
Holy
that, we
moly.
really don't have anything. I have requested an additional scanner just because with the new employee helping with accounts payable and stuff, and we do scan all of the invoices in, that will help with the workload that we have. Other than that, it's pretty much
What is that, close to 15%? Are we gonna be able to live in the future with the 3.5%? I mean,
yes, sir.
we're sure not gonna live with it this year, are we?
No. But we do have an additional employee who is being funded by admin fees and staff. And we will have those fees for at least 2 or 3 years for sure.
Sure.
Well, will we have them or we'll get them in the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, we
We don't get the money until we get the money for the grant, do we?
No, we've got several projects that we're already gonna be able to do. We're working with Congress right now to get that program all funded. We've got basically about $2.5 billion available to us to draw on from projects now, and that's not including Cedar Bio will be another probably $500,000.
6.4 total.
The percentage, it's like 5% of the total. So that and with all the grants, because we do have.
It would sure be a big help going forward to have the experience for the first 6 months. They don't have any experience,
sir.
right? And every time I ask a question on that, I don't get the answer, okay? I don't know what it is. I
That's
know
why
it's,
I pulled
is it
the
that
other
much?
I thought I heard her say that it would be in your next deal.
Right.
It will be. With the way that the spreadsheet was, it was,
Anna's
I
gonna
took
give
that
us a
fine out. I got
presentation
called
on
out.
it.
Because to me, it was kind of confusing, and I realized it would help. And it may help more to have the 6 month instead of the projected year to date. Having both of them in there, it's just, it makes my.
Well, the
spreadsheet
projected
really
year to
neat.
date on so many items where you paid the majority of it up front. Projected
It's
year to
gonna be the
date's really
same.
all.
Well, there's always timing differences, but it's nice to have a reference point. I mean, but what you're giving us is this the whole department percentage wise
Mhm.
right there.
Yes, what I did give you, yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was on the
But,
department,
but
not line by line.
under the old basis, we actually had it broken down
Yes, sir.
in detail.
We can add that. Our next workshops are scheduled for the 2nd and 3rd of August. And I can have those in there.
I might want to change my mind at the 2nd and 3rd of August. Be too late to change at that point.
Hey, whatever y'all want.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Nobody wants to give Tana a hard time since she's here.
Come on, Bubba.
I just told her she's been to the presentation.
I can call back up, get Renee in here.
In case y'all missing out on the joke, Tana's a little shy of public presentations. We're trying to bring her into.
Yes.
Do you usually sit through budget hearings at other counties? Am I sitting through budget hearings? Do you normally do this?
I do a good number of them just because, when I was DA, I had like 6 or 7 different budgets I had to deal with in the counties. And, the other judges don't like me very much, so they keep sending me.
We saw they didn't even put your name on the list. They put somebody
No, it
else's.
was supposed to be Judge Bauer.
Yeah, they get y'all looking forward to Judge Bauer, and I show up and like, Mr. Smith is always.
He's actually here to see how I was doing.
Didn't you say the next budget meeting?
August 2nd and 3rd.
Oh, yeah. We did that before you did, but that's all right.
Well,
That week though, that Monday.
the first Monday and Tuesday of August.
Thank you, though. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
She did good. Even though she did leave off Charlie 6 months.
We try hard to run a good county.
Okay. Nothing else, do I have a motion? Motion made and seconded. All in favor, thank you.
I have a lot of people tell me I'm kind of weird because I like budget. This is one of my favorite things to do.
How's my friend Dwayne McWilliams doing?
He is doing okay. He's hunkered down in the Northwest and, joined his grandsons. And then one of those other grandbabies too.
Is his wife still doing well?
She's doing okay, yeah.
He handles my oil. You know, I'm not making money off of it, but he's handling.
Yeah, nowadays,